Do you have any other old records besides these?
Seymour does.
Who does?
Oh, him. Seymour. He's the man with the records.
Do you have any old Indian records?
Indian records?
Yeah, like old Indian 1960s rock and roll music.
I may have one Hindu 78 in my collection from the 20s, but it's not really for sale. I don't really collect foreign. Those are all 78s. You play 78s?
Oh, maybe not 78s, but I can play regular records.
Well, there's some good stuff in here. You like old music?
Yeah, it's good.
Well, there's some choice LPs in here that reissue some really great old blues stuff.
How about this one? Is it any good?
Nah, that one's not so great. Excuse me. This is the one I'd recommend. And this track alone by Memphis Mini is worth about $500 if you own the original 78. I know the guy who owns the original and lent it for use on this reissue.
Wow. How much is it?
$1.75. If you don't like it, you can bring it back for a refund. We're here every Saturday.
I'm sure it's okay.
Hello and welcome to Book versus Movie. This is a podcast where we read books that have been adapted into movies and then we try to decide which we like better, the book or the movie. I am Margot P. of coloniabook.com and this is my good friend and co-host Margot D. of Brooklyn Fitchick.
Hi, everyone.
It's October 1st. We made it. We actually made it.
We made it through Mercury in retrograde, y'all.
It was horrible. That was a horrible Mercury retrograde. And then we were just saying before we got on the air, like New York was like underwater this week. It's been just,
Yeah.
I'm so glad it's October 1st. I got up this morning and I was making my coffee. There's like a slight chill in the air here in San Diego. It's a little drizzly. It's like a weight has been lifted. I just love October so much. And I cannot wait to talk about today's book and movie. But before we get to that, perhaps you found us today because you're into graphic novels. And sometimes we've done a couple of graphic novels in our history, but really what we talk about here is movies that have been adapted mostly from books, but really, if we're being honest, they're adapted from any kind of literary source because we try to crank out a brand new episode every single week. And, we're busy people. We were just going over our itinerary. We have a very busy week coming up. So we're not going to be, it's not going to be Phantom of the Opera at this time. It's going to be something a little shorter. Sometimes we have time to do, something longer. But in October, we do like to plan spooky type movie adaptations. We're kind of baby stepping into the spooky waters today with today's episode. All of this is to say that we have a really wonderful community of listeners who give us the most amazing suggestions, including what we're going to be talking about today. This was a listener suggestion. If you have ideas for books and movies or, a magazine article, a song, a play, anything that's been adapted into a film that is easy to stream, as long as we can get our hands on both the source material and the movie in an easy kind of way that everybody can get, then we will consider it. So there's a few places where you can meet other listeners, interact with us, make your suggestions, and basically enjoy us on the internet.
We are on Facebook. We have a basic Facebook page, but that's just a place to post the episodes. We don't really interact there. We're much more interactive in our Facebook group. Please join the Facebook group if you do have Facebook on your phone. If you do check Facebook, it's Book vs. Movie Podcast, and you have to ask to join. Thaddeus was kind enough to put up two lists at the very top. One of them is a list of shows we've done already, pretty complete, and the other list is the shows that people have in mind for us in the future. That's the Book vs. Movie Podcast group. On Threads and Twitter and Instagram, you spell out book versus and movie. Please follow us in all those places if you use those social media sites. And we also have an old-timey email, Book versus Movie Podcast. Spell that all out at gmail.com. And if you would like some we'll send you some stickers. Send us your address. Also, as Margot said, the movie needs to be streaming. We were going to talk about something else with another person, a special guest, and at the last minute, they took it away from us from streaming. So you do double check that for us and make sure. But anyway, yes, Margot, those are all the places.
If you really, really enjoy the show and you would like to kind of, look, we're coming up, again, for those of you who are new, we've been around for a really long time. And in podcast terms, we're coming up on 10 years, which is
Ancient.
Unbelievable. A very long time. If you would like to be a part of keeping this show going, you can also support us on Patreon.
Patreon. We have been doing the show for 9 years now. What we've decided to do is we put 2 years worth of shows in the regular feed. That's for freezies and also all the holiday Christmas stuff because y'all seem to love that every year. But everything else we put on the Patreon wall. What we've done recently put up there, Silence of the Lambs, Psycho, Turn of the Screw, Stepford Wives, Phantom of the Opera, and Stand By Me. They're all there on our Patreon wall, plus dozens of other episodes. And we use that money seriously just to get us our books and movies and ship them to each other. So thank you all so much who support us there. But we ask that, look, if money's tight, we totally understand. If you could just leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts or tell a friend about the show or ask for a sticker and put it on your laptop and go to the coffee shop and look cool. That'd be amazing.
I remember hearing about today's movie. I think I was already married when it came. Yeah, I definitely was already married when it came out. I never saw it. And I remember just people liking it and talking about it. But I got to tell you, Margot, I had never seen this movie. I didn't know anything about it but the title. I did not know it was based on a graphic novel. I knew absolutely nothing about it, which is unusual for us. Usually going into an episode, I know something about it, even if I haven't read the book or whatever. This is a rare occasion where I'm just totally blind. So I decided to go in completely cold, got my hands on again, I didn't even know it was a graphic novel. Like I had to go find that out on my own and got my hands on the graphic novel, read it. I didn't read anything about the author, anything about the movie. I wanted to know nothing about it. So I really wanted to have like a fresh experience. What would it be like being a young person reading the series of, comics in the 90s? Wow. We are talking about Ghost World. At first, I gotta just say, I was a little trepidatious. I was like, really? Like, it's a dude he's writing about. Like, I know what it's like to be an adolescent young person in the 90s. Like, I'll be the judge of that. I gotta say, I'm very impressed. I am very impressed. Let's get into it. Let's start with our author because he's no slouch.
No, it's Daniel Clowes, born 1961 in Chicago. He's known for 8 Ball is the series that he's seriously known for, and then Ghost World is a part of that within there. We should make this clear. We're not experts when we take on a book and a movie. We always kind of just dive in and just do the best we can with it. He, like I said, he was very popular. These were very popular stories. So Terry Zwigoff is our director, and he basically contacted him and said, I'd like to do my first feature, because he did Crumb before that, and Crumb was the illustrator that's from San Francisco.
Yes. And that was how I had heard of the movie because I had seen Crumb. I saw Crumb in the art house. I must have been in college. I saw Crumb in the art house. And I remember everybody being like, oh, God, you remember the guy that made Crumb? He's made this. And if you've not seen Crumb, the documentary, I mean, it's also extremely impressive.
Absolutely.
He does, I think, a really great job of giving you a very full picture of this very controversial artist. So anyway, so you were saying he wanted to make a feature film, a fiction film,
right?
And wanted to do it based on Ghost World.
Yes. So Clowes had won the Harvey Awards, Eisner Awards. I mean, he's known as a graphic novelist, and people. San Diego Comic-Con, like everywhere, everyone knows who this man is. So Terry Zwigoff wanted to make his first feature and have it based on, original material, something different. And people told him, you should look up this material. And for me, I never read this before. So we have a book called Adaptations, and it's from short story to big screen. It's a whole bunch of short stories, and Margot and I have just been mainlining on this when we have a hard time figuring out what to do for the show. And they have a story in there called Hubba Hubba. So this is 1997, and it has Enid and Becky. She's known in the book, but she's Rebecca. It's their story, and then what he did was he combined with Zwigoff, and they created this film. So the 1997, and this is the most 1997-ish thing I've ever seen, are these girls in this story. And they're new teenage. I mean, they're newly graduated from high school, so they're like 18, but they're kids to me. 18-year-olds are kids.
Yeah. Well, in the film, Scarlett Johansson is 16 when she made.
She
this
was 15
movie.
when she auditioned. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
in the I read the graphic version. I was super impressed. Like, I really felt transported back to the 90s. Now it was extremely reflective of my adolescent experience. Like, if you go back, I'm going to say, maybe 10 years, I'm 10 years older than these girls are. So if you're going back to like the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, that's when I was going through this experience. But I mean, I had at least one friend like this. Several, right? And you go through this cycle. I mean, I was so impressed at the way that he captured adolescent girl friendship. We even had a guy friend that was like Josh that we, annoyed all the time just for funsies. Very, very impressed. And so we have these two girls, and they have been friends. We established early on that they have been friends since they were tiny. They've known each other and they know each other super, super well and are very close. They know everything about each other. In the graphic novel, anyway, I don't think they've quite graduated yet. Mm-hmm. It's looming, but they have this plan. They're planning that, when they graduate, they're gonna like become, working young women and get an apartment and live their independent lives finally the way that they always dreamed of doing.
Which is what you think of when you're 18. You don't think about beyond like a couple of years. You're just like, I just need to get a job in an apartment. Like, those are just simple things. Yeah.
And their plan is really that they're not going to go to college. They've decided that they're not going to go to college, that why should they wait to live the lives they want? They don't need college for that, is what sort of the idea. And they do what teenagers do. They play pranks on people. There's a lot of like prank calling and stuff going on. And they have this guy friend named Josh, and it's always unclear like whether one or the other of them has a crush on Josh or whether he has feelings for them. We don't really know, because they're these are very young people with not a lot of emotional experience, and so they're figuring these things out, right? And they're also growing independent of their parents. We see a little bit of their relation. They seem to have good relationships with their parents, I would say, on the whole.
Oh yeah.
They don't have like abusive parents or anything like that. It's honestly, it's like not a lot going on. It's just these two teenagers who are friends near the end of high school, and they're trying to just figure out, they're about to launch into the next phase of their lives, which doesn't feel like a big event. It's just sort of a thing. It's just life keeps going on. And eventually, through the course of the graphic novel, and it's different than in the movie, and we'll talk about the movie when we get to it, but eventually they, once they're really faced with time moving on, I think they start to sort of realize that they kind of have outgrown the friendship, or at least the friendship is going through a phase where, they maybe are going to be apart for a little bit. It doesn't mean they don't care about each other. They don't have that history, but but this is, it was so authentic. I was so impressed.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm really impressed with this book.
I'm super impressed with it. I mean, it does bring back a lot of memories, and the same thing for you. I'm like 10 years older than these girls, but it's still the same thing. And especially for the mid 90s, the ironic detachment and sort of everything sucks. Nothing's original. Nothing's really cool. People like the dumbest, lamest things. That's what you would say.
Daria.
Right. I mean, they're just very Daria. I mean, it's like, Nirvana times 1,000. Like it's just they're like I said, the ironic detachment. So they go to they go to a 50s diner, but they make fun of the music and they make fun of the server named and we all did this when we were teenagers. You think you're so important and special and you're funny. You really think you're funny, like when you're that age. And sometimes like, nah, you're just me.
Oh yeah. We thought we were so hilarious and clever and issuing a steady stream of blazing satire on the situation that we lived in. And and these girls, I mean, I just felt so transported back to that time. I don't know how we did it. I really don't.
He must have teenagers or something. That's got to be something. But I remember when I was that age, I used to think, I thought of this the other day, like I thought adults were so corny, like they laughed and cried over the lamest things, like the most, the very sentimental. And then as I'm getting older, I'm extremely sentimental. I cry because life is powerful sometimes. But at their age, they're kind of like, school's boring. I don't want to be here. But so we have to get an apartment, I guess. We'll have to get a job, I guess. And who's going to take us around? I guess Josh. So we'll flirt with Josh and give him a hard time. And Josh works at the convenience store. And there's people that come in out of the convenience store. And they meet in the story Hubba Hubba, which is the diner that they go to. They don't have it in the movie, but they notice Seymour. And then Seymour's a character that he's advertising for a date. Like people used to put ads out for, this is how you met people.
There used to be. Yeah,
Newspapers.
I mean, now people do this on social media. And that's another really key thing is that this is a pre-social media adolescence. This is probably why you and I are relate to it so much is it's still in a world where social media really hasn't happened yet. I looked for my first job in the newspaper, didn't you?
My first apartment and job.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you go through the
Village
newspaper,
Voice.
you'd get it right when it came out in the middle of the night, and then you'd sit down with your little red pencil and you'd circle the jobs or the apartments that you were interested in. So these girls are doing that, and they come up. There's a section in the classifieds where people also list jobs and apartments. There was maybe it still exists. There was a section called something like missed encounters or something like that, right?
Right.
There would be the section where you could leave messages, anonymous messages. Dear sir, who saved my puppy from that oncoming car. I never got a chance to thank you, but it meant the world to me. Or it would be something like, dear girl on the train who was reading Bridget Jones' diary, you had a blue bag. I think you're really cute. I am a 17-year-old student at NYU, and people would reach out to, it sounds so archaic, but people really did reach out for connection in this way.
Right.
And if you're a teenager, we did this, you would read that section for funsies and giggles.
And laugh at people.
And laugh at people. And laugh at people being their most vulnerable. And
right.
Reaching out.
Because we don't understand those emotions.
It's very embarrassing now. But we know you, because you're not emotionally immature enough to realize like how vulnerable these people are being in the newspaper that everybody reads. And now when I look back on it, it blows my mind. I cannot imagine getting up the guts.
Right.
And you would have to call the newspaper on the phone and dictate your message to a human being on the other end of the line. I mean, it was a whole thing.
Single white female looking to meet the man at the coffee shop who wore the green sweater. And he would read that and he would come or he would not come. So these teens are basically doing this to Seymour. They see him and they see this schlubby guy. That's their interpretation of him. He's middle-aged and he's not exactly like they're used to boys, and here's a middle-aged man. And so they set this up for him so that he comes to the coffee shop and then he leaves. Basically in the story, that's pretty much it. Like I said, they're laughing at him and they don't really have feelings for him, but it's a graphic novel. It's really quick. And it also is, you're mean sometimes at that age and you don't really appreciate loneliness or, because you're around people all the time. You go to school, you go to work, you don't.
Yeah, you are playing around. Again, it's about your emotional development, I guess. And you play around at these things for fun without realizing that there are like actual humans involved in these pranks and that you may be causing them harm or pain at the very least. So the whole series has moments like this, like there's this, and I don't think he's in the movie at all, but there's this much older gentleman who comes into the coffee shop where they normally hang out. And we would go and hang out at the coffee shop, after school and whatnot.
You get
ditch
French
school to go to the
fries
coffee shop. Yeah.
and the bottomless
And-
cup of coffee and order nothing else. The waitresses hated you. 'Cause you didn't tip
And there's
well.
a guy, there's a similar guy who also, but he's older and he also hangs out at the coffee shop all day long. And they're always like wondering about him. And it turns out he's a psychic and he offers them a free reading. And so there's this whole thing about them trying to just get up the guts to call him for their free reading. And there's a couple that comes in, they assume that they make up this whole story that this couple are Satanists and decide to follow them. And I mean, they kind of have nothing going on in their lives. And so their imaginations go a little wild. It's such I guess adolescent boys must go through the same thing as well. But that was what we did.
And
That's just what we did.
And if you have like a really pretty friend, she usually gets most of the attention from guys and they pay attention to her first. And it's all this stuff tracks, all this stuff rings true. And also the fact that they're maturing at different levels at different paces. And so Enid kind of wants to be wearing, by the way, the black hair and the thick glasses and the schlumpy clothes and the boots and stuff. And Rebecca, she's a little bit more ready to kind of grow out of that. Like, all right, I'm not a high schooler anymore. What else is there? And that's sort of the tension that's kind of between them. Because Enid likes having her wingman, like somebody that just, because she's the one that, a very unfortunate description, but like she's one of those people that does take up oxygen. Like she just is one of those people that takes over their personality. Whatever they're curious about, everybody has to then be curious about. I realize Becky's like, I have my own stuff I really want to pursue. And I don't probably want to catfish people like forever because it's mean and I want to do something else.
And ultimately, but it's all these like just series of little vignettes of illustrating what Margot just described. And so, the end is at the end, it's Enid, right? That decides that she's going to go to college.
No, I think Rebecca. Am I right? I'm sorry.
Is it Rebecca? I'm getting confused now. One of the girls decides that she's going to go to college. And that is like breaking a massive, burning a massive bridge. Like, oh, so everything we've always talked about is not actually going to happen. And the girls, their friendship, they have a fight and you see each of the girls in pain, like each of the girls with their crying in their homes and their parents are kind of like, oh gosh, are you okay? And they're like, yeah, I'm fine. Nothing's going on. But they're going through, this pain of that relationship, maybe not ending, but certainly evolving and maturing out of what it always has been. Mm-hmm. And, which is such an adolescent, it's such a part of your development growing up. And then I can't think ultimately she doesn't go. She's not able to get in or something like that. But anyway, these girls are going from childhood into early adulthood. The friendship is ceasing to serve them and is not going to survive for a little bit here. We're going into a phase where they're not going to be friends for a while. But they still care about each other. It's so good. It's so good. And the art is fantastic. It reminded me very much of a lot of the comics of the day of like Linda Berry and what was that one? This Modern World. Mm-hmm. And it was a very like, I mean, like I said, I transported. I loved it. I don't know what else to say. I felt like that was I felt like my adolescence was in this book.
Same. So this is when we get to this material where we have, once again, Terry Zwigoff is the person that takes on this, and they combine together. So Clowes helps him write the screenplay. They do this together, and it's his first screenplay, and he's nominated for an Academy Award for it. And they pitch people, and people are like, well, how hot are the girls? Can you make this movie move faster? Because there's a lot of pausing. Because there's not, it's this tale of like a couple of weeks between these girls. It's not, there's not so much that goes on, but you and I know everything is going on between them. at this time. So why don't we play the trailer and then we'll get into it?
What you think you're doing? Shut off that damn noise!
Rock and roll, baby. Freedom of speech.
That guy rules. They can't believe we made it. We graduated high school. How totally amazing.
I can't help but feel I had some small part in how you turned out.
Sometimes I think I might be going crazy from sexual frustration.
You just hate every single guy on the face of the earth.
That's not true. I just hate all these extroverted, pseudo-bohemian losers.
You guys up for some reggae tonight?
Do you have any other old records besides these?
Seymour does.
Who does?
Oh, him. He's the man with the records.
What are we in slow motion here? Come on, what are you, hypnotized? Have some more kids, why don't you?
जान पहचान हो जीना आसान हो.
I'm allowed to place one student from your graduating class for a full one-year scholarship, and I took the liberty of submitting your name. This could be a really great thing for you.
Would I have to take classes and stuff?
Well,
I'm just not the kind of guy who has a type.
Every guy has a type. What about her? Whoa. Would you go out with her?
As long as she's breathing.
Hey! Hey! You! How many times I tell you? No chef, no service. Get the hell out of my store. What do you think this is, Club Med?
It's America, dude. Learn the rules.
Loosen up. Feel the music.
Ghost World. The underground comic book comes to life.
We have to get together this summer.
Yeah, that'll definitely happen.
Written by Daniel Clowes and Terry Zwigoff. Directed by Terry Zwigoff.
Do you serve beer or any alcohol?
After about 5 minutes of this movie, you're gonna wish you had 10 beers.
So are Enid and Rebecca are Thora Birch and Scarlett Johansson, who are... Scarlett Johansson was she born 35 or something? She's so mature and poised. I mean, she's a kid. I get that. But
I think they both are in this
God.
film. I mean, it's really impressive. I don't know how old Thora Birch is.
She was born in 82, so she's 18, 19.
Okay. First of all, 100% buy this friendship, 100% buy their history. Thora Birch was in Hocus Pocus, speaking of spooky movies.
Yes.
I always think of her as the daughter in American Beauty. Like that to me is like the quintessential.
Yes, and
Thora
Now
Birch
and Then
role.
was a movie that she did about the girls. And
she's done a lot of stuff.
Right, she's a million things. Yeah, I saw her on, they had a Pittsburgh con, and they did an interview with her. And it was like two people asked about Ghost World, and everybody else asked about Hocus Pocus. And be honest, I've never seen Hocus Pocus. I'm sure it's great, but...
You know what?
Generation.
People are going to freak, but I think I saw it right when it came out. I remember very little about it. Haven't seen it since. I know it's on TV all the time. Don't have a TV, so I don't, it's not like it's on in my house all the time. My kids were not into that movie, so didn't see it with them either. What I mostly remember is that it had Kathy Najimy in it, who I absolutely adore.
Yeah, and Sarah Jessica Parker and Bette
I
Midler's
remember
amazing.
Kathy Najimy, and that's what I remember about that movie.
Right.
And I do remember the kids. I do remember that they were very good. This is a great cast. This is a really great cast.
Ileana Douglas is the art teacher. She is every art teacher I had.
She's every art teacher. She's all the art teach. She's amazing. Every time she comes on the screen, I laughed out loud at this movie so many times. I think I laughed out loud at the book a couple of times. This movie I couldn't believe how many times I laughed out loud. When it started, I got to say, the opening scene, because I had just read the book, the opening scene, and I was like, oh, I don't know. I might hate this movie. I'm going to be really disappointed if it doesn't really deliver on what I just read, because I would really like that so much. But when Ileana Douglas shows up, oh, man. I'm all in. And I liked the choice. Okay, let's finish the cast. So we've got Ileana Douglas. Did we talk about Brad Renfro
as Josh? R.I.P.
Josh, he's great.
He's so good. He was such a good actor. And we also have Bob Balaban as some really great people. Stacey Travis is Dana, the real estate agent that Steve Buscemi dates. Steve Buscemi, my God,
Steve Buscemi is so good in this. He is always fantastic.
Perfect as Seymour.
Perfect.
Yeah. Dave Sheridan is Doug, and he's the shirtless guy in the mullet with the nunchucks. It cracks me up.
This movie is so
Terry
good.
Garr is in this movie.
She's great. Everybody is great in this
David
movie.
Cross.
Who's the one that plays her dad? The one that plays Thora Birch's dad. He's in
Bob Balaban.
everything.
He's in
Yeah.
everything. Everything.
He's great.
Yeah.
He's the perfect dad for her.
Bruce Glover, who's Crispin Glover's father, he plays the guy in the wheelchair. And it's hilarious. I told Margot I was watching on Criterion Channel, which, by the way, it's not on there anymore. Last Day was the Last Day for Ghost World. And sometimes they have on Criterion the director's commentary and the writer's commentary. So I was listening to them, and they said that scene where they're in the coffee shop and he's typing into the computer. And they said it was the last time you could do that, where people knew you were not typing into a search engine. Like, you just typed a word into a thing. Anyway, they start out with the girls. And like you said, it was almost like Heather's again with the person in the wheelchair giving a speech, and we're and they're doing hip hop, and I had the same reaction. I'm like, oh God, are they just going to be obnoxious? And then no. I mean, you do get to know them as people, and that whole thing is just their front, that they're bored.
Yeah.
Everything's, just not interesting to them. They're actually scared. They are. They're scared of adulthood. Like, they know that they need to grow up and they need to go out there. But at the same time, it's so comfortable to be home. You have your room there. You don't have to worry about rent. You don't have to worry about things. But then you have rules. So if you go out, then you have to get a job. You have to get a job, then you have to follow the rules of the job. You have a boss. They're scared to move forward, but Rebecca's the one that's like, yeah, we need to do this. We need to dress. I love it when Scarlett Johansson, so she says, like, we have to dress nice clothes so we can get a nice apartment. We have to look like yuppies. We have to look
Which is true.
Yes. Which is very true.
If you're an 18-year-old recent high school graduate trying to get an apartment, you better show up like dressed for the job you want.
Yeah, and Thora Birch, of course, dyes her hair green and then wears a punk rock. And I love it when she goes to the store and they make fun of her. Punk rock is dead. She's so dying for to be unique and different and special. And it just kills her when she doesn't make that. They meet Seymour in the cafe, and there's Weird Al in the cafe too. I mean, just like in Hubba Hubba. Pull the prank on him. And then they follow him, and it turns out he sells records in his spare time. Like, he's in a little garage sale. And that's where we meet him. And like I said, Buscemi is so good in this movie. Like, your heart breaks for him.
He has... Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, we all knew this guy. This guy still lives in my neighborhood, I'm sure. He's... and he says as much. He is socially awkward, doesn't even cover it. Inept, yes, and he has these interests in these obscure vintage things, as do I, and he's friends with other weird collectors, but he doesn't have, he hasn't had a steady relationship with a woman. He's heterosexual, but he hasn't been able to maintain that because he's just too weird. He has this corporate job that he's been stuck there for years and years and years, and he really only uses it to fund his interests, to pay his rent and fund his interests. And he and his roommate, who is a similar collector weirdo, they have like a little makeshift flea market in their garage every weekend, and the girls, after pulling the prank on him of setting him up with the personal ad thing, they stumble upon oh my gosh, that's the guy that we really hurt. He's got this weird little thing with his friend, selling vintage stuff in their garage. And
the mongoose,
it's not
the stuffed mongoose. That's
there's a stuffed mongoose.
And also and I've been through this before where you go to a table oh, how much is that? I'm not selling that. I've been to places or stoop sales where people just instantly go, oh no, I don't want to sell that. But that's where they meet him. It's like I said, his name makes them laugh. Like everything about him makes him laugh. And at that age, you can't contain yourself when you're laughing. Like teenagers laugh at everything. As an adult, you're like, you can't do that. That's mean. It's, you have to be.
It's mean.
It's so mean. They're so mean. And there's some reviewers that were like, oh, I can't stand these characters because and it's like, it's just,
why? Because it's too close to home.
It is.
Because that's what teenagers are like. They're genuine. I was like that.
Yes.
My friend and I would have laughed right in Seymour's face. And bought the record.
And then asked for something stupid and then laugh about it and think we're being hilarious. And they also have Josh that they make drive them around. And he's a cutie pie and he's so good in the part. But Rebecca is the one that gets most of the boys to pay attention to her. And she's the one that tends to be a little more mature and realizing, like, I got to get a job if I'm going to get an apartment, if I'm not going to go to college. So she gets a job at a coffee shop. And it's not Starbucks, but it's the same color apron.
Again, it's the turn of the century.
It's over 20 years ago.
Yes, Starbucks was out there. It wasn't the multiverse that it is today, but yeah. So she's got the dark green apron on, and there were many more independent coffee shops even then than there are now. But anyway, so she's got I was a barista in right out of high school. That was my job. I got a job as a barista.
Did you like it?
I
never did barista. That's
watching Scarlett Johansson, like it so took me back. The place is still there. It's called Twigs. If you're familiar with San Diego, it's on University. It's in University Heights. The original owners, they were theater folk. Like she was a set designer, I think, and he was a composer or something like that. And this was sort of like their fun business on the side. And so, basically, like they hired a bunch of surly adolescents like that, like we were allowed to eat and drink as much as we wanted.
That
basically.
sounds like a dream.
It was not bad. And it had like cozy armchairs and sofas and newspapers and books, as coffee houses did back then. And so we would just sit around eating cheesecake and drinking espresso after espresso and reading the newspaper. And then a customer would come in and we'd be like, bye, and get up and go and help them and be all surly. So yes.
Well, so she gets a job at the coffee house, and then Enid, because she likes movies, she's like, I'll just work at the movie house. She fails spectacularly at that.
I'm gonna let you handle the 4:30 crowd by yourself. And that way you can evaluate your performance while it's slow. And then we'll ease you into the bigger crowds, all right?
You can count on me, sir.
Cool. Do you serve beer or any alcohol?
I wish. Actually, you wish. After about 5 minutes of this movie, you're gonna wish you had 10 beers.
What are you doing? You don't ever criticize the feature.
Why? What's the difference? I mean, we already got his money.
Look, that's the policy, okay? If you want to make up your own rules, open up your own theater.
Yeah, let me have lots of butter on it.
There you go, smothered in delicious yellow chemical sludge.
What the hell is wrong with you?
What? I was just joking around with the customers. It's my shtick.
Well, lose it. And why aren't you pushing the larger sizes? Didn't you get training about upsizing?
Yeah, but I feel really weird. It's pretty sleazy.
It's not optional.
Because they want her to upsell and they want her to be cheerful and not just tell your dumb jokes. She's like, that's my shtick. It's like, you're not clever.
My friend from high school, one of my two best friends from high school, right when we were graduating from high school, she worked in the local art house, in the movie house. And she was always doing stuff like that. Like, it's a miracle they didn't fire her. But it was, if it had been like an AMC, she would have been so out of there. But it was like a landmark vintage kind of a movie house. Oh, she did all the things. Like, she would just speak like that to the customers. She did the number one forbidden thing in a movie house, which is she would burn the popcorn. And you would walk, like, the most unappetizing smell on earth is burnt popcorn. Like, people would walk in. Yeah, you smell burnt popcorn. You don't want candy. You just want to get out of there, right? So she would burn the popcorn, and So that's so. So that too. I was like, this is my life. I'm watching my life.
They also set this in LA, so we do have a sense of place. It's not that bizarre. Seymour and Enid develop a friendship of sorts. So she takes him on as a project, like, I'm going to help you get a girlfriend, because she wants to make up to him for being mean. And so she sets about trying to do that, and he goes on like some awkward dates, which are like, he goes to the blues concert, and it's that blues band that's like, oh my god, like every 90s blues band. Oh, they're terrible.
So 90s.
Brought up so much, because it was either that or swing bands, like, were like all of a sudden.
Yes, there were some artists who were doing like a blues revival or doing like a swing revival, but there were many, many, many more artists who were doing really terrible blues and swing.
Yes. And it's something.
It was mostly that.
It was mostly that was dating in the 90s. I swear to God. So she tries to set him up, and he does actually a woman finds him, because they had connected previously through the ad, and then she was in a relationship. She gets out of the relationship. She contacts him, and then they go out on a really nice date, and he's like, oh, good, I'm with an adult. I'm with somebody who's a lot like me. And Enid feels jealous because she's developed feelings for him, and she likes having him as her lapdog. Let's be clear. She likes having somebody who just shows up when she tells them to. So she kind of sabotages that relationship. And at the same time, she loses her job. So she's sabotaging her apartment that she's supposed to get with her friend. And her friend is offering to cover the rent, but then she realizes quickly, like, that's a mistake, because Enid needs to get it together. Enid's got problems. Then we get to one of the most, I think, difficult parts of the story, like nowadays, which is that there's an encounter between Enid and Seymour. She gets really lonely. She comes to his apartment. She's very vulnerable. And when I was listening to Clowes and Zwigoff, talking on the soundtrack or the commentary track, and they're like, well, she was 18. So, I mean, I was like, yeah, but he's like 45. This is not.
Yeah, that's not what the relationship was. Yeah,
yeah. So they have sex, and it's very quick. Like, they do the kissing and then they fade out.
Oh yeah, it's not in the film. It's not very like explicit or anything like that. I will say that. Like, at least they didn't. It wasn't like.
What happens is that he.
So he, as we said, he has this corporate job.
Right. Okay, so we forgot all about the painting.
Yeah. So I love this. None of this is not in the book at all, and nor is I don't think the art teacher is in the book at all either, because they're still in school. So in the movie they've graduated, and I love the whole thing about having the I thought that was such a good choice. Like, when we got to that, I was like, oh, I see. I kind of like this idea of them graduating right off the bat. Enid has failed art. Enid, who is an artist, has failed art classes. She needs to take art over again in the summer. So she is taking this art class with all the other kinds of people who fail art. And the art teacher, who is every art teacher, is Ileana Douglas, who's amazing. And kids are really like, they're just bringing in any old thing and being like, yeah, this is a found object. It's, and the teacher's like, oh, wow, that's so deep. And so as a laugh, Enid borrows this very racist piece of artwork from Seymour. It's a piece of his company's original logo, which is super, 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 super racist.
We're not going to repeat it.
And she brings it in and as an example of found art and as a statement on racism, and it makes a plausible argument, I think.
Sure. But she didn't do anything to it. I mean, she just
brought it in.
One little dash on there. I could have said, okay, I could see this here. But no, she didn't.
Do my project based on this discovery as kind of a comment on racism and how it's whitewashed over in our culture.
Did you actually do this painting?
Well, no, it's more of a found art object.
And how do you think this addresses the subject of racism?
It's complicated. I guess I'm trying to show how racism used to be more out in the open and now it's hidden or something.
And how do you think an image like this helps us to see that?
I'm not sure. I guess because when we see something like this, you know, it seems really shocking and we have to wonder why it's so shocking.
I don't really know what to say, Enid. I think it's a remarkable achievement.
And then so she's like, oh, well, and at first you think she's going to set her up like, well, how do you think this represents racism? And Birch's like, well, I just think it's complicated, you know? And she goes, I think that's great. Like, that's so brilliant.
Yeah. And then not only, and this is on the teacher, man. The teacher takes it upon herself to enter this very controversial found object. I mean, and then she never claims to have done it herself, right? Enters this very controversial found object into the student art show with zero context. What does she think is going to happen? And we were led to believe that the teacher is assuming that Enid, who was, let's be clear, is still an adolescent, is still a child, is going to explain to the public about this, which to me, like as an art student, as a former art student, like that crosses the line. Enid is not there when people first encounter the artist. So they're getting it like totally out of context. Like, what is this? Why am I being assaulted by this very racist image? And Enid is not there because she's at Seymour trying to ask Seymour to come with her to the art. She wants him to see the art show, right? He asks her to leave because his girlfriend, Dana, who's not the greatest for him, but, you know, he's trying. Yeah. But anyway, so they have a little bit of a fight because Dana, understandably, doesn't want her middle-aged boyfriend to have a friendship with an adolescent girl. Call her crazy.
Right.
Anyway,
I'm not comfortable with this. Let's just say.
No, I'm not. No, nor I. Seymour's like, yeah, it's probably not a good idea. So sorry, kiddo, I'm not going with you. And so they have a fight, and she ends up not going to the art show. But she does make up her mind that she will accept the art scholarship that her teacher has extended to her. So when she shows up to tell her teacher, yes, I think I do want to go to art school. Thank you very much for the scholarship submission. She learns that there was a whole to-do about her artwork and that it was ripped down from the walls and the newspaper printed out about it. Now, Seymour had made her promise that she would take very good care and not let this get back to him, that he had this work of art. I'm not sure if his employer knew that he had it or not, but in any case, it looks real bad.
He had a scrapbook, and so because it had a racist name to it, and so he was collecting it just as a historical document. But he had all the menus and the napkins and things like that.
The hidden history of his employer. Yes.
So that would have presented a bigger picture, a broader picture. But I don't think they knew he had that painting or that picture.
Right.
So to have it put out there and nobody's explaining, like, no, we changed this in the 50s. This is something. Blah blah blah. So he loses his job. He gets fired. Yeah. Rebecca gets tired of Enid's just flibberty gibberiness, and she cuts off the friendship because they're at a different place. She's excited. Rebecca's excited because she gets an apartment and has a little thing that you bring down and makes an ironing board, and she's like, "Isn't this great?" Which I would have been like too. Oh, that's cool. Even though I don't iron, but she wants to pick out glasses, and she's at Pottery Barn and she's having fun. Yeah. And Enid's just nowhere near any of that. She's
not ready for any of that yet.
No, so she winds up crying in her bed. We've all been there. And then she goes to Seymour's house and she says, everything's screwing up. I'm messing everything up. Could you please just hang out with me for a minute? That's when they have sex.
Yeah.
And then the next day, as they move forward, she realizes like this is too much. Like she doesn't really want to have a relationship with him so much. Like she realized, like, this is probably a line I shouldn't have crossed. I mean, it's like not like she hadn't had sex before, but still, it's different with him. So she's supposed to move into her apartment, and then he's looking for her.
Yes, because everything is blown up in the papers, and he's lost his job.
And he's upset. And so
naturally.
So he shows up at the apartment, and that's when Scarlett Johansson says, this was a joke we played on you, and that's probably...
Yeah, we're so sorry about that. I feel bad about that joke, and he didn't know.
No, and so he looks at the scrapbook, and in her art book, where she does her sketches, she had it like, oh, look at loser Seymour. And that's all he saw, and then he got upset. And he didn't. When you go further, you realize he develops a crush on him. So then she gets nicer and nicer pictures of him. But he just sees that. So then he gets upset, and he thinks Josh is in on it for some reason. So he goes to the convenience store, and then starts losing it on Josh, who's like doesn't know what he's talking about, and then
he doesn't know anything about it.
He's like, what?
Yeah.
And then he like tries to knock over something in the store, but it's bolted to the ground. And then the guy with the nunchucks comes in.
Hey, did you have a good laugh at my expense?
What do you mean?
Do you think that's funny? Here, is that funny? I'll show you something funny.
Hey, come on.
Get...
Not so cool now, are you? Good-looking boy, huh?
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, call the cops, man. Citizen's arrest.
You!
Call the cops.
Get the hell out of my store!
All right, hey, no need to get violent. I'm out of here.
They're fighting. And he ends up in the hospital. So he's lost his job. He's lost his girlfriend. He's had this. He has slept with this
teenager
girl. He probably should not have done. And he's found out that he was the butt of a very cruel joke. And now he's gotten in a physical fight with Nunchuck guy, and he's in the hospital.
He's hurt, and she shows up and says, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened." And she's trying to make it up to him. And then she leaves, and we didn't mention that there's this guy that she sees that's on a bus stop.
Something we forgot to mention when we talked about the book. Throughout the series, because when it was published as a series, but then throughout the graphic novel, as you read the graphic novel, Enid, as she's walking around her town, sees here and there like graffiti that says Ghost World, and she doesn't know what it means. In the movie, that does not happen.
Yeah, they originally did, but they took it out because they said it's just too obvious. Like,
I agree. I thought it was a good move.
Yeah.
And so instead we have this guy, this older gentleman who is sitting at a bus stop, and the girls early in the film are walking down the street, and this is in like San Pedro, where I just was there. It looks exactly the same. The girls are walking down the street, and they see this older gentleman, like, oh, he's sitting at a bus stop where the bus doesn't run here anymore. Like, we should tell him. And they tell him, and they realize, like, oh, he's not living in this reality. Like, he really thinks that there's a bus coming, and he's going to like move on to the next phase of his life. And we see throughout the film, every now and again, like they walk by and he's still sitting there. And every now and again, like she'll talk to him.
Enid does.
Enid does. And he's like, yeah, no, my bus is coming. And I'm going to be, she's like, no, the bus isn't coming. He's like, well, that's what you know, because I'm waiting for this bus. Yeah. So that's the ghost of Ghost World is this character, which I think is such an awesome move. I love that choice.
I do too. She gets an argument with Rebecca. She goes to see him in the hospital. Rebecca basically says, call me later. I'm going to live by myself. You figure yourself out and we'll have a chat. But she's basically, peace out. I gotta protect myself a little bit here. I gotta take care of my future. So so Enid goes by the bus station and the man goes on the bus. And then the bench says not in service. And you're wondering, so what's going on?
Yeah. So she's gotten to this point where every single thing in her life that she thought she could count on has blown up in her face. Her lifelong friendship with Rebecca, her friendship with Seymour, Her dad is now going to marry Terry Garr, who she cannot stand. And she's sort of moved out of her house, but also sort of not moved out of her house. Everything is nothing is settled. And she had mentioned briefly earlier in the film that the guy, Norman, I think is his name, the man on the bus stop is the only constant in her life. And so she goes over just to see him, just to like see that he's still there. And there he is. He's sitting there, but then he stands up all of a sudden. And this old bus from the 1960s, it's an old bus, chrome, it's probably they got it out of a museum somewhere. This old bus pulls up. Norman gets on the bus and the bus rides away. And she's stunned. And the bench says not in service or no longer in service or something like that. And she's just, so now he's gone too. Everything is gone. And then it blacks, then we go to fade to black and you're like, was that the end of the movie? And I've thought, well, okay, that's an interesting end to the movie. Huh. Okay. So we just don't know. And then nope, fade back up. And we are back on the street in San Pedro. And Rebecca is there and she's wearing a very nice suit, the kind that she probably should have worn to go apartment hunting.
You mean Enid?
And Enid, I'm sorry, Enid. And she's wearing regular shoes, not combat boots. And she has a little like 1960s hat box suitcase. And she's walking down the street at either dawn or dusk. Where is she walking? She's walking with tremendous purpose. And then we see her walking up to the bus stop, which is now empty. She sits on the bench that says not in service, and she's just waiting. And then we cut to Seymour with his
therapist who hates him. We don't know what happened with Seymour, but he's now in therapy and he lives with his mother. We're told, and he's trying to figure it out. He's kind of like, do I start getting a job? Do I do this? And the therapist doesn't care. Like the therapist is so mean. His mother shows up and says, "Did you talk to her about what we're going to have for dinner tonight?" And he goes, "No, I guess we'll talk about it in the car." And I forgot to mention that when she goes back and talks to him when she's crying, she says, "Why don't we run away together? Let's run away." And he realized we're not going to do that. I'm not running away. Yeah. But to her, that's like, let's just start all over again. And I love you don't see this anymore, thank God, but they used to see wires everywhere for phone.
Remember, the sky was full of wires.
Everywhere. Everywhere. So that's what you see too. But she's on this like empty bus that's on this empty bridge that apparently they blew up. It doesn't exist anymore. It's like by 6th Street in LA. It's like the 6th Street bridge.
Oh, I thought it was still there. Is that there's still bridges like that in San Pedro, but it's not the same one.
Yeah.
I was literally just there and it looks exactly like that with the old, like, what do we call that? What revival, Margot? Like, like a Baroque revival from the 20s and 30s, kind of street lamps, very Hollywood Gothic kind of looking. Still there. I don't know if that bridge is still there, but that area still looks very much like that. Very spooky, like haunted.
Very much so. And
sure.
And you get that a lot from people, especially in LA, coming and leaving LA. People want to be movie stars or whatever. So that's but she's going on this bus and you don't know where she's going because it's at a weird time of day. There's nobody else on the bus.
And it's a bus it's the same bus that picked up Norman. It's the vintage 60s chrome bus. Is it real? Is she dreaming this? We don't know. Is she going off to art school? Because we didn't hear, although things kind of went kablooey, we didn't hear that offer got rescinded in any way. So she could very well be going off to art school, which would be great. We don't know. But what we do know is that she has, through all this sequence, which has no dialogue, we get that she has come to terms with the fact that she needs to let go. These things, the time to put away childish things, like, is that from the Bible? I don't know. But
or Joni Mitchell.
Yeah. But she realizes, like, I need to move on, just like I was really impressed when they're in the Pottery Barn and like how 90s a Pottery Barn was that.
Did you not
finish
your apartment? I couldn't afford Pottery Barn. I would go there for the inspiration, and then I'd go to the dollar store, try to find something that resembled.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I appreciated that when Scarlett Johansson was like, "Well, I'll pay for everything and you can pay," and she was like, "No, no, I'm not going to do that. So she realizes like, I need to stop caring whether my dad marries. If that's what he thinks is right for him, like that's not my business. I gotta move it. I need to move on from this thing with Seymour. It's kind of weird, and at the very least the timing is off. And I need to, and I need to let Rebecca live her own life and do her own thing. And
she's been a good friend.
She's been a good friend and not have me dragging her down. And so it's just this symbolic of her just moving on into her future, uncertain though it may be. And I just love this movie.
I do too. And as usual, when we go down our rabbit holes, I went down the hellish Reddit rabbit hole, where there's a subreddit about whether or not she dies by suicide. There is a whole...
Oh.
There's a whole... And by the way, Zwigoff and Clowes say no. Absolutely not. It's just symbolic.
Why would you think that?
There's people because
of the bus?
The bus is empty.
The bus could be a lot of things.
That's what I say too. This is like, the creators, there's a whole subset of people that think that. They say no. They say absolutely. They were gobsmacked when they heard because they said absolutely that is not the case.
No.
Funnily enough, Thora Birch at one of those Comic-Cons said, I don't know, it seemed really dark to me. Like, I think she was in a really dark place. But that's a different thing than that. She is in a dark place, but she's also very young and she's got options ahead of her. But she's got to figure things out. She's got to grow up quickly and figure things out. And that's her lesson. And yeah, I felt the same way. At first I was like, oh, they just got to be bratty and obnoxious. They think they're too cool for everything. And then you realize like it's all a front.
Yeah.
They're very vulnerable underneath. We all just want to be smart and funny and cool. It's just, it comes with some effort sometimes. You want to make it, and it's relatable to me. Very relatable.
So much. Yes. I just loved it. I just thought it was done so well. I really loved the choices that were made that were different from the book. I thought were really smart. And starting with, like I said, having them graduate at the beginning of the story, I thought was a very interesting, especially because I just read the book. So I just read the book, and in the book they're leading up to graduation. And I don't know about you, but like I finished the book and I was like, oh, but what happens to them? I want to know what happens next, because they're not in a good place. They're not ready to move on to the next thing when the book ends. Like they're still very much in that like, what's going to happen? And so to have the movie kind of picks up where the book left off, even though we're replaying some of the stuff that's in the book. So I really liked that the movie does look at that slightly next step in their journey. I loved the choices. I loved having it be the graduation right at the front. I loved the Seymour thing. I wish they hadn't slept together, but okay. It just was very authentic, and I just really appreciated the whole thing. I thought it was so well done.
I did too. I love the costuming. I see when this movie comes out, like the following October and every October since then, I've seen somebody dressed like those two. like doing a version of Ghost World cosplay. It just really holds up. It's super smart and it's super, I don't know. It gave me the feels. It actually really gave me the feels.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. And I thought it wouldn't. I really thought, like when I was watching the beginning,
I know.
Even the trailer, I was like, I don't know. But no, it got me. It got me. So anyway, so it does have something of a ghost.
Yeah.
A little bit ghosty.
Hey, we got a little ghost in there. So
and a mystery.
We did. So, book versus movie.
Ooh. I really loved them both. I'm going to give the edge to the movie. And I will say it had a much more memorable soundtrack than the Lorax.
That's what we covered last week, if y'all don't know. Yeah. Oh, yeah. This soundtrack is fun. And it's
good soundtrack.
Good soundtrack and not overdone. Because they could have jammed it with pop hits and just.
They could have. And it's just enough. Like we get Seymour's records. And we get the punk, and we get but yeah, you're right. Just it's not hitting you over the head with the soundtrack. And I love, the what do you call
the Indian
music? The score?
Yeah,
no, the score, the actual score of like them just walking down the street when we do have music. And there's a lot of silence, you know, where we're just hearing the ambient noise, which I love. Anyway, yeah I'm going to say movie. But I loved them both. It was like such a nice surprise to have such a fun experience reading the book and then watching the movie.
Especially
it was really cool.
Because a lot of the books that we covered for Banned Book Month, some of them were bummers. So I was worried this would be a bummer, or I would just be annoyed by it, which was going to also be like, oh, that's going to get on my nerves. And I actually wound up loving it and really going, And I have to say, I think Steve Buscemi is a big part of it too.
Definitely.
His Seymour
he's great.
Yeah. I mean, and then Thora and Scarlett should do all the movies together. I just want them to make them a crime duo or something. Like, I would watch it.
Give them a series.
Yes. Netflix series.
So let's talk about what we're doing next. I just love October so much.
Should we
give
them
so many
October?
good options on the table?
Should we just give them all?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think
We'll do this in a particular order we're figuring out. The next episode will be Wait Until Dark. It is. We've had a lot of requests for it, by the way, because we do cover plays to movies. Audrey Hepburn, Alan Arkin. As soon as Alan Arkin died, I was like, Margo, we got to put this on for October.
I know.
I love that man. It's one of my favorite roles. So that's what we're going to do next. Then we have, for the month, we're going to figure out which day we're going to do things and what time of the month. But House of Usher, Fall of House of Usher, the one with Vincent Price, right? That's the one.
Yeah.
We're also going to do, I love this, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Fabulous. And then back to Stephen King. Everyone's been begging us for Stephen King. We're going to cover Misery.
Yes.
So that's our October.
So, spoiler, Misery will probably be last because it's the longest. Yeah. So we're gonna probably need the whole month to get ourselves through Misery because we have outside of the podcast, we have a very busy October. It's been like years of people asking us to do Misery. So it's time. We got to do it. I know. I'm very excited. I'm so excited to read Wait Until Dark. He's so good in this movie. I cannot wait. I'm very excited.
It's fabulous. It's like New York City, late 60s. Audrey Hepburn, that apartment.
I always, in my mind, I always see this movie as the flip side of Barefoot in the Park.
Oh, yes. Oh, it's the evil Barefoot in the Park. Yes, it's the evil universe. It's like 2 blocks away, too, like compared to like where they filmed it. It's fabulous, and it's got a great jump scare, like of all jump scares. I saw it when I was at Peak. It was at the Poconos, and I was it was a junior high trip, and that was the movie they played for. And there's a big picture of all of us going, ah, from that scene. All those places I mentioned at the top of the show, please send us your suggestions. Also, our email, once again, is bookversusmoviepodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review if you can. And Margo, where can they find you?
You can find me online at coloniabook.com, and all my social media callouts are at She's Nacho Mama. And where can they find you?
You can find me at Brooklyn Margo for Twitter. Also, Blue Sky. I got an invite for that, Margo.
Tell me about it. I only recently heard about it. Of course, I have not even really jumped on the Threads train myself.
I'm on Threads too, trying to figure out something so that I don't have to use X anymore. We're there for now, and all of our social media, we're just about books and movies. So just to Anyway, I'm at Brooklyn Fit Chick for Threads and Instagram. My site is brooklynfitchick.com, and I am on the TikTok at Margo Donahue. That's my name. All right, everybody. Happy October. We're super psyched about this. Next week, it will be Wait Until Dark. Thank you so much for listening to the Book versus Movie podcast. We are a part of the Frolic Podcast Network. You can find more podcasts you will love at frolic.media/podcasts. We follow the hashtags LadyPodSquad and Podern Family. If you want to support the show, you can go to our Patreon page, go to Patreon, and look for Book versus Movie Podcast. We have a basic Facebook page, but we also have a private Facebook group. Go to Facebook and type in Book vs. Movie Podcast group if you want to join that. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Book versus Movie. Spell all those words out. If you'd like to send us an email, it's bookversusmoviepodcast, spelled it all out, @gmail.com. You can follow Margo D at Brooklyn Fit Chick on social media, and Margo P at She's Nacho Mama. Thanks so much again